The judge didn't even look me in the eye when he handed my son to the man who once forgot him in a parking lot. That's how this story begins, not with a fight, but with a quiet kind of cruelty. A custody agreement typed up by someone who had never heard my son's laugh, never seen the way he flinches when voices rise, and I was supposed to nod and thank the system. This is the story of how a mother, branded as too emotional, too calculating, and then finally too tired, learned to navigate the cold terrain of legal strategy and family manipulation. My ex-husband knew how to smile in court. His new wife knew how to cry at the right time. I knew how to survive. And I did more than survive. This isn't about revenge, it's about reclamation. It's about a woman who learned to read the fine print, who used the very rules meant to silence her to build something stronger, for her child, for herself. If you've ever felt invisible in a courtroom or doubted your instincts as a mother, this story is for you. So take a breath. You're not alone. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready for stories that cut through the surface and go straight to the heart. Stories about justice, quiet courage, and the power of saying, "I'm not done yet." The envelope was thicker than usual, manila, no handwriting, just that printed address label and the weight of something official inside. I bent down, picked it up from the doormat. The corner was damp from the morning fog. My thumb traced the edge, careful not to tear it, and I slid out the stack. Petition for custody modification. My eyes caught the line before I even meant to read it. Not fit due to overwork. I stood still in the hallway. The refrigerator hummed behind me. There was oatmeal cooling on the table. My son's drawing from yesterday still hung crookedly on the fridge door. 2 stick figures, one seated at a desk with a yellow light. I turned toward the kitchen, but instead of walking in, I set the packet down on the counter and reached for my phone. I'd reply, not in tears, in timestamps. My instinct was to call, to explain, but I knew better. He would twist my voice into the echo of emotional, stressed, inconsistent. That's how he always won arguments, by making me feel like I had to prove calmness I already lived. So I opened my laptop instead. My response would not be a paragraph. It would be an exhibit, a ledger. Hours, dates, logins, GPS coordinates, pediatrician receipts, signed school forms. I would build a case that spoke the way I had always lived. Scheduled, quiet, steady. The courts would not weigh my heart, but they would weigh my pattern. So I created a folder. Custody Chrono. Inside it I added a blank spreadsheet and typed the column headers. Date, pickup, drop-off, responsible parent, notes. I would not argue, I would align. He once told me in that smug offhand way of his, "The court likes parents who show up, not just at work, I mean." He said it while pouring coffee, like it was just an observation, not a strategy. But it was a strategy, his. He believed that availability was love, that the one who stood at the school gate more often, who dropped off forgotten backpacks, who showed up to the Thursday piano recital, should win. Never mind that I funded the piano lessons, or that I worked overnight shifts so I could afford them. To him, being there meant physically present. To me, it meant dependable. I made a note in the folder, a log. I titled it, "The Availability Fallacy." Then I clicked to open my calendar. He wanted this to be a battle of hours. He would get one. I scrolled through my inbox and searched the word late. Up popped school alerts, daycare handoff notes, and 3 emails from the after-school program, all time-stamped, all uncolored by emotion. Each one was a data point. Each one built a structure. I copied them into the ledger, added columns. Then I opened my bank app and searched for the pediatric clinic. 3 receipts, all signed by me. I'd already been keeping the evidence, unknowingly. Now I just needed to arrange it. Each hour I'd traded away from my son had been traded for him. I clicked back to the folder and started organizing by week. I'd show that care isn't measured in free time. It's measured in who shows up even when they're not free. I reached over and turned on the desk lamp. The yellow light settled over the papers like a silent witness. It cast a rectangular patch across the manila envelope, warming the legal text with something nearly human. I smoothed the pages flat and began stacking documents. The smell of fresh printouts mixed with the subtle scent of the wood varnish. The air was still, the room quiet. Not dramatic, not tragic, just prepared. That's what custody would come down to. Not speeches, not accusations, but quiet preparation. I made a checklist: school pickup logs, doctor visit receipts, teacher emails, backup caregivers. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for a pattern to be seen. The phone vibrated once, then again, then a third time, and then it stopped. I didn't need to look. I knew it was him. He wanted a reaction. He always did. But I was no longer in the business of reactions. I was in the business of records. I let the phone go still, then I clicked Save As and named the file CustodyEvidenceMaster.xlsx. The cursor blinked. The desk lamp buzzed faintly above me. He wanted a custody war. I would give him a custody strategy. I pulled up my work calendar and opened the CSV export from HR. 6 months of timestamps. Login times, logout times, flagged overtime. I scanned the spreadsheet, then inserted color-coded labels: green for standard hours, red for double shifts, blue for overnight calls. The weeks bled together, each cell a pixel in a quiet argument. The pattern was obvious once visualized. My longest weeks aligned precisely with his claim that I wasn't there. But absence wasn't abandonment, it was provision. I inserted a new column: childcare backup used. Then I marked each week I'd arranged help, detailed by name and timestamp. Nobody saw it, but I was there, even when I wasn't. Behind every highlighted red block was a resolved ride home, a packed lunch handed off in the dark, a reminder call to the school nurse. Now I had proof that didn't need explaining. Next, I exported GPS data from the family locator app we'd agreed to use before things turned hostile. It felt strange, tracking my own past like surveillance. But I clicked through each pin, mapped them into a chart. School, home, daycare, pediatrician, piano practice, grandmas. The paths zigzagged like threads sewn tight. I marked every point where I'd been the one to pick up, to drop off. There were more than I remembered. And every click, every one, carried a timestamp. I aligned those timestamps beside his claim dates. The contradiction was mechanical, unemotional, exact. As I stitched the data together, the sound of the mouse clicking reminded me of a metronome. Steady, undeniable. No defense attorney could cross-examine time. The drawing sat where it always had, taped low on the cabinet just above his cereal box. A rough sketch of a woman at a desk, a yellow dome of light above her, a child on the floor, smiling. I'd seen it 100 times before, never truly seen it. But now, with the legal notice sitting in my email and the spreadsheet open in another tab, I looked again. He remembered the light. Not the bags under my eyes, not the late dinners or the coffee reheated 4 times. He remembered the light I turned on when I sat down to work. When I sat down to answer another teacher's email or sign another field trip form. I took a photo of the drawing and saved it in the folder. I named it perspective_001.png. Evidence, too. In my filing drawer was a folder labeled Medical. I pulled it out, flipped through until I found the urgent care receipt from the night he had a fever. His cheeks were burning, his fingers limp in mine. The clinic was crowded, the nurse had frowned. I remembered signing the Guardian line. Twice. The ink had bled slightly from the pen. I scanned the form and highlighted the section with my signature. It wasn't dramatic, just present. Then I looked up the date and matched it with my email records. An alert to my manager that I'd be missing my shift. I added that email to the ledger. 2 things true. I missed work. I was with my son. I remembered what the nurse said that night, still clear in my head. You again? You're always the one who brings him in. That was always the case, and now it would be on record. I pulled up my email app and searched Ms. Delaney. There she was, my son's teacher. Her words as formal as always. Confirming that you have been the primary parent picking up Noah from school during the past 3 months. He seems to adjust well with your consistent schedule. I read it 3 times before downloading the PDF and renaming it teacher_confirm_01.pdf. It felt sterile, but it also felt honest. Not a favor, not an opinion, just a record. I filed it under the folder, Witnesses, Daily. Then I tagged the message in red and highlighted the date on the shared timeline spreadsheet. A clean link in the chain. They wouldn't see my exhaustion in these files, but they would see my presence, over and over again. I opened the master timeline and began layering in each data point. Color-coded rows, columns tied to a shared axis. Green, school pickups. Blue, medical visits. Yellow, confirmed witness statements. The timeline wasn't poetic, it was a spreadsheet. And yet, there was a story in the symmetry. Where he claimed inconsistency, I showed pattern. Where he implied neglect, I showed presence. The courts didn't believe emotions, but they believed schedules. I clicked save. The screen dimmed for a second, then returned. The file sat quietly in the folder, like truth waiting for its turn. He sat across from me in a quiet office suite, dark tie, neat file tabs, a pen he didn't twirl. The attorney didn't ask me how I felt. He asked for data. I slid the folder across the desk. He flipped through it silently, page after page. Overtime schedules, GPS logs, pediatric receipts. He stopped at the school timeline I'd printed and tapped twice. "You're documenting well," he said. Then with the tone of someone used to losing cases over emotional detours, he added, "Don't defend, compare." He scribbled something on a yellow pad and turned it toward me. "Reframe custody as a schedule, not a sentiment." I nodded. This wasn't about telling the court I loved my son. It was about telling the court I had the data to prove I'd always been there. The pen clicked as he capped it. We moved to the next step. The attorney leaned forward and spoke in clean, measured terms. "We flip the narrative," he said. "Have him suggest a schedule, in writing. Let him describe how available he is." It made sense. If he believed he had the time, let him quantify it. Not vague promises over coffee, signed hours. We drafted a temporary parenting schedule that tilted toward his claimed availability. "Let's have him approve this version," the lawyer said. "Same hours he boasts he can manage." I copied the proposal to a shared drive. Then I emailed it to his attorney with a subject line that read, "Temporary allocation proposal, based on father's statement." If he rejected it, we'd show the contradiction. If he accepted it, we'd log the results. Either way, the clock would start running. Outside the lawyer's office, I passed his mother in the hallway. I hadn't expected her to be there. She wore a quilted coat, perfume thick and floral. As I moved past, she turned. "You left your child to chase a career," she hissed, just under her breath. Not loudly enough for the receptionist to hear, but loud enough for me to carry it into the elevator. The words didn't sting, they scratched. They sounded like something she'd rehearsed. I pressed the button for the ground floor and stood in silence, counting the seconds between each mechanical ding. Outside, the wind pushed at my coat. I didn't respond to her. I wouldn't. Every accusation they tried to slip under the door, I would meet with a timestamp. The building didn't sway, neither did I. On the drive home, I thought about that word, workaholic. He had used it before. His mother used it freely. And now it lived inside a petition stamped with the court's watermark. But workaholic is not a legal classification. It's a stereotype. So we reframed it. We would argue that availability, not overwork, created gaps. He had unstructured time. I had structured responsibility. We'd show how his blank calendar was not freedom, but detachment. My attorney underlined it on the board during our next call. Empty time must become accountable time. I took notes, even though I knew it by heart. The story would be told in missed pickups, unanswered teacher emails, late tuition payments. Each one of them proof that free time isn't parenting. Presence is. We filed a motion for an expedited status conference. A quiet move. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in tempo. The court granted it. The hearing was now less than 2 weeks away. Time to consolidate. I created a subfolder titled Status Conf Prep. Dropped in the incident logs, emails, proposed schedule, and witness PDFs. Everything labeled, time-stamped, cross-referenced. I added a cover page with a clean grid. Week, pickup percent, father, mother, notes. Then I added the final row. Suggested hours, father's statement. Let the court compare promise to performance. Let the judge see the contrast. Nothing would be said aloud, just shown and logged. I flipped back through my own notes. Tight bullet points, clean formatting. At the bottom of one page, the attorney's words stood alone. Optimize for measurable time, not emotional plea. It echoed. Not because it lacked heart, but because it held clarity. This wasn't about asking the court to feel. It was about giving the court no room to doubt. So I typed the phrase into the header of my working file, a kind of thesis. Then I closed the laptop. The house was quiet. My son's shoes were by the door, slightly off balance. I lined them up neatly. Small things done consistently. That was the story I'd tell. The waiting area outside the courtroom was full. Parents with folders on their laps, lawyers checking watches, children fidgeting with crayons on clipboards. He stood across the room from me, flanked by his attorney. His expression unreadable, eyes darting. When our case was called, we stepped forward. The courtroom wasn't dramatic, just beige walls, a high clock, and a microphone that clicked on when we spoke. He led with emotion. "She's never there," he said, voice firm. "I've had to be the one flexible." The judge didn't flinch. I opened my folder and passed a printed calendar forward. Color-coded, signed entries, notes from teachers and staff. The bailiff handed it up. I didn't speak. Not yet. I let the calendar speak first. The judge read silently, then nodded. "Let's discuss specific weeks," she said. We began. I turned to page 7 in the packet. 3 consecutive weeks where he failed to pick up Noah. The entries were exact, highlighted, 5:17 p.m., 5:19 p.m., 5:22 p.m., each followed by, picked up by mother, in bold. My attorney handed over the exhibit. He looked down at it, then at the judge. I spoke softly. "I'd like the court to refer to the timestamp on January 14th. The judge adjusted her glasses. 5:17 p.m., thank you. His lawyer whispered something. He shook his head. The courtroom was quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of papers and the slow tick of the wall clock. Data didn't raise its voice, it just stayed steady. The kind of truth you can't argue with, only redirect. Or try to. He straightened his shoulders. "If needed, I can care for him 80% of the time," he said. The sentence dropped into the room like a coin in a jar, small but loud. My lawyer didn't blink. Neither did I. The court recorder typed. The judge repeated, 80%? He nodded. I wrote it down in my notes, underlined it twice. That number would matter. In time, that number would have to stand against the clock. His confidence wasn't the issue. His follow-through was. Still, I didn't smile. Just drew a line underneath the statement and labeled it, self-declared capacity, on record. A promise made in a room that records everything. The judge leaned back in her chair and adjusted the papers in front of her. You both will submit proposed schedules based on your stated availability, she said. There was no reprimand, no ruling, just an assignment. I looked at my attorney. He gave the smallest nod. I wrote the instruction down. Later, I'd refine the spreadsheet and generate the visual. No opinions, no explanations. Just blocks of color and hours filled in. She wanted proposals. I'd give her one based on patterns. He would give her one based on hope. Then we'd see which one held up. Because calendars don't lie. They just reflect. As the judge moved on to the next case, we stepped away. The plastic legs of his chair scraped loudly as he stood. He folded the printouts unevenly, stuffing them into a soft leather briefcase. I noticed his hands were trembling, just barely. Enough that the zipper caught. For a moment, our eyes met, but there was nothing to say. This wasn't about who loved Noah more. It was about who built structure around that love. We walked out in silence. No shouting, no confrontation. Just the sound of legal process, slow and exact. As we passed the clerk's desk, the status light above the docket blinked once, then again. Then it went out. A different family stepped forward. New names, new file numbers. But inside my bag, the record of today was already stored. I sat in my car and reopened the file, typed a note at the bottom of the hearing summary. Father declared 80% availability. Court acknowledged. Then I added a second line. Calendar-based proposals due before next hearing. The engine started. The dashboard lit up. And quietly, without celebration or grief, I drove home to pack Noah's lunch for the morning. The case had begun, on paper, exactly where I needed it to be. The bank statements arrived in a thick envelope. I opened them carefully, laying out each page on the dining table under steady light. His income column was blank. No deposits, no W-2 trail, no invoices. But his expenses? Streaming subscriptions, restaurant tabs, online gear orders, thousands spent on comforts. The cash-out line stood out. $240 here, $180 there. Each transaction labeled ATM withdrawal without note. I highlighted them one by one and made a separate column labeled Non-child-related discretionary spending. Then I totaled the amount across 3 months. The number didn't lie. He wasn't working. He wasn't contributing. But he was consuming. I circled the total in red ink. The court wouldn't need to guess what mattered to him. It would be printed in font size 11, line after line. I searched my inbox for proof of employment, or rather the absence of it. Each email thread with his HR contact said the same thing. He had promised to submit documents next week. 4 times over 2 months. Each message echoed the last. Copy, paste, delay. I downloaded them, renaming each one. Employment Pending 1 through Employment Pending 4. In isolation, they were mild. Together, they were a timeline of stalling. I slid the documents into a new section of the ledger and added an annotation. Failure to verify work status. He wanted the image of responsibility without the function. The court wouldn't need to be told. It would see the pattern. Same words, no results. Promised intentions, never acted. Deadlines missed without urgency. It didn't need malice to matter. It only needed repetition. I opened my ledger of payments related to Noah. There were 2 invoices from the after-school program, both marked overdue. He hadn't paid his half. The total wasn't huge, but that wasn't the point. The program had even waived late fees for me, assuming I was covering. I called the director to double-check. Still no word from him, she said. No, I replied. Didn't think so. I added the call log to the ledger, then searched my notes from Noah's coach. An email sat there, dated last month. Your son is doing well. Let us know if his dad plans to attend next week's game. He hadn't shown. Again. I saved the email and tagged it, participation gap. A parent doesn't need to be perfect, but they do need to show up. Even the bleachers remember who stood there. I made a side list of backup caregivers. Ms. Ruth next door, the after-school coordinator, my sister who lived 40 minutes away. Each one had filled a gap he left. Each one had picked up when he didn't answer his phone. The list wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, dependable. I formatted it into a clean table: names, contact info, dates they stepped in. Then I added it to the parenting plan as a supplement. If he argued availability, I would show him reliability. I didn't do this to undercut him. I did this so no matter what happened, Noah wouldn't wait at the gate wondering who was coming. The truth was simple. I built the safety net he never thought about. Now it would sit printed in black and white. In the official parenting plan draft, I scrolled to the section labeled Proposed Custody Structure. There I entered a new metric: Pickup Reliability Index. It wasn't a real legal term, but it would mean something. A place to track missed pickups, delayed arrivals, uncommunicated absences. I filled in what I knew already, added room for more, then exported the document as a PDF. I named it Parenting Plan v2.pdf. No flourish, no narrative, just data points with columns. On the left, scheduled responsibility. On the right, actual follow-through. He could argue effort, but not execution. And the court would always choose the side that delivered. I printed a red tab and labeled it Avoidance Pattern, Flagged. Clipped it to the front of the financial folder. It wasn't personal. It wasn't vengeful. It was structure. The kind that holds steady when things fall apart. I slid it into my bag, zipped it, and placed it beside the others. The desk lamp buzzed quietly. Outside, the wind had died down. I glanced at the clock. It was 9:47 p.m. Another quiet night of evidence building. Not for a fight. For a future that wouldn't be dictated by declarations but by records. And mine were almost ready. I submitted a request to the school for footage from the entry camera. They didn't ask why, just told me where to sign. 7 days, all within the last month. Each one documented, me stepping through the gate, sometimes carrying his backpack, sometimes holding his hand. I paused the footage on each arrival and took stills. The timestamps sat in the corner of each frame like quiet signatures. I opened Photoshop and labeled them by date and time, then stacked them in a folder. No edits, no filters, just truth, framed in fluorescent hallway light. I printed them, one by one, and slid them into plastic sleeves. Under each, I wrote, Documented drop-off, primary caregiver. It didn't need more. The images said what words couldn't. Consistent presence, routine, captured on camera. From HR, I requested confirmation of my flexible work schedule. A quiet favor, granted quickly. They sent a formal email with attached documentation. Subject: Confirmation of shift adjustments. Inside, it detailed the weeks I'd traded evening calls for morning coverage, specifically to attend Noah's parent-teacher meetings. No embellishment, just logs, approved by supervisors. At the bottom, the HR director had typed a single line. She has consistently made accommodations to be present for her child. I saved it as a PDF and titled it Employer Support 01. It wasn't just about being there, it was about rearranging entire schedules to be there. That's not convenience, that's commitment. And it was now on record, signed and sent. I texted him mid-week. Let me know your availability this week. He replied in minutes. I'm totally free. Take whatever time you need. The tone was casual, friendly even, but casual isn't custody. I took a screenshot, saved it as text1faultfreegeweek.png, then logged it next to the court's hearing date. He hadn't noticed the overlap. Or maybe he had. Either way, the message was clear. He was claiming availability. Soon, that availability would come with accountability. I sat still, the light from my phone casting faint shadows on the tabletop. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The record was building, not through confrontation, but through repetition. I sat down with my pen and began checking through the case ledger. As the pen clicked open, I noticed how the sound filled the silence. Sharp, final. Each column was now cross-verified. GPS, HR, school, receipts. The pieces were no longer fragments. They formed a structure. I scrolled through the log and marked one word beside each week. Verified. A small act, but definitive. My hand didn't shake. The process wasn't dramatic, just exact. I was no longer reacting, I was executing. This wasn't revenge, it was custody. Structured and sealed in documentation. The pen clicked shut, and I moved to the next item. I updated the shared calendar and entered a new line. Alternate caregiver, Ms. Ruth, authorized. I printed a checklist with her number and backup plan, placed it in Noah's backpack under the lunchbox. Simple. No announcement, just preparation. Each page was dated, laminated, and trimmed to size. If I ever couldn't be there, someone would, and that person was documented. I checked the folder labeled contingency plans and slipped the new checklist inside. One more safeguard. This wasn't just about proving my involvement. It was about proving my foresight. The kind of detail that doesn't argue, it simply waits to be found. I opened the ledger once more and added a final column to the week's entry. Third party verified. Yes. I marked the school footage, the HR letter, the email from the teacher, the text from him. 4 sources. Independent, aligned. The ledger no longer looked like defense. It looked like fact. Row after row of substantiated parenting. I pressed save, then closed the file. The screen dimmed. The desk light cast a steady glow across the closed laptop. It didn't feel like a war. It felt like order. Exactly what custody should be. I cleared space on the fridge and taped up a new chart. Daily blocks from 6:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., morning, afternoon, evening. Breakfast, school drop-off, homework, reading, bedtime. Each square had a task. Each task had a time. It wasn't rigid, it was navigable. A roadmap for anyone claiming readiness. I printed 2 copies, one for the fridge, one for Noah's backpack. Routine is protection. Not just for children, but for anyone about to walk into structure they've never had to sustain. I placed a highlighter beside it and wrote in clean print at the top, color the tasks once completed. The chart didn't accuse, it guided. If he really wanted time with Noah, this was the starting point. Not declarations, delivery. In the kitchen drawer, I gathered what I knew might be overlooked. His allergy list, the dosage of the fever reducer, the pediatrician's name, address, and after-hours line. I placed everything on a single laminated card. At the top, I wrote, Health and Safety, Essentials. Then I clipped it to the inside of Noah's duffel. I didn't trust that he'd remember, but I gave him the tools to succeed. There's a difference. I laid it beside a list of emergency contacts, double-checked that Ms. Ruth's number was current, and included the after-school director's name. Then I folded the packet and labeled it, Caregiver Packet, Week 1. He said he could handle 80%. Now he had instructions that made 80% possible, or revealed, quietly, that he couldn't. The pickup list needed signatures. I emailed it to him with one request. Please sign and return this by Friday for alternate caregivers. No reply. So I had 2 neighbors, one already listed, sign in advance. I printed physical copies and gave them to the school front desk. Red folder, top drawer. Nothing dramatic, nothing said aloud. Just done. If he forgot again, or called last minute, the school would already know what to do. I wasn't closing him out, I was closing the gap he didn't know existed. I made sure the list included their driver's license numbers and I added their backup availability in my own spreadsheet. This was how structure wins, by arriving early, by being ready before questions are even asked. There's a kind of warning that doesn't sound like one. It just sits in the margins of a plan. I added a small footer to the daily routine chart. If pickup is delayed by more than 15 minutes, contact the school front desk. No blame, no tone. Just procedure. One clear rule that applied equally. I printed it at 10-point font and slipped it into the handoff folder. If he missed the window, the school would notify me automatically. I didn't need to guess anymore. I didn't need to call and ask. Systems work better than conversations, sometimes. Especially with someone who believes planning is optional. Now it wouldn't be. It would be policy. I created 5 incident report templates and printed them on carbonless copy paper, one for each weekday. Lines for date, time, pickup delay, lunch forgotten, or any deviation. At the top, parenting time, weekly accountability sheet. I slid them into Noah's folder. Noah wouldn't notice, but the adults would. If something went wrong, it wouldn't vanish. It would be recorded. I wasn't trying to catch him. I was giving him the benefit of full visibility. Accountability doesn't accuse, it clarifies. And this way, he couldn't say he wasn't informed. The form would speak long after the apology, if there ever was one. I updated the ledger and typed in one final sentence at the top of the week's plan. Availability must include responsibility. It wasn't an opinion, it was a threshold. Each item, chart, contact sheet, emergency form, incident log, was now part of the packet I titled Shared Parenting Toolkit, Implementation Week 1. It looked clean, organized, unremarkable, but it was airtight. I closed the folder, fastened the tie, then I slid it into Noah's backpack. He'd carry it into the new schedule unaware, and I'd wait. Not to be proven right, but to see what followed when the blueprint became real. Sometimes you don't need to confront someone. You just need to give them what they said they wanted, exactly as they described it. He sent the email late at night, no subject line, just 2 image attachments and a message. This is what she calls parenting. The first image was a collage, Noah staring out a window, drawings of empty chairs, a timestamp from 6:42 p.m. The second, a still from a play I had missed due to a hospital shift. I didn't respond. I opened my laptop and pulled up the school check-in logs. Then I filtered the data to match the timestamp in his photo. At 5:32 p.m. that day, I had signed Noah out from aftercare. 1 hour before the photo he'd sent. I exported the log, added the GPS tag, and highlighted the entry. Pickup by mother, 5:32 p.m. His image was staged. The story cropped. And now I had the frame he left out. I traced the timeline backward. That entire week, I had picked Noah up each day, between 5:17 and 5:45. The app logs were exact. I pulled up January 12th. Pickup at 5:34. Location ping near school. Then GPS movement home. Each line aligned. I dropped the screenshots into a fresh document and labeled the top, Week Comparison. Claimed absence versus documented pickup. Then I added the time-stamped image he had sent. Below it, my log. Same day, same time, different parent. I didn't need to refute the picture. I just needed to hold it up beside the facts. The court would see the edit, would understand what had been excluded. Narratives bend, but timestamps don't. I drove to the school and asked to speak with the security guard. He recognized me right away. "Still keeping things calm?" he asked. "Just confirming a few details," I said. He looked at the logbook and pointed to the week in question. "Yeah, he wasn't here. Haven't seen him during pickup all month." I asked if I could take a photo of the book page. He allowed it, standing beside me as I framed the shot. Then he initialed the corner without being asked. Not to take sides, just to confirm what was. Outside, the breeze smelled faintly of weak coffee from the staff room. I saved the image under a new folder. Gate confirmation, independent verification. If you wanted to use snapshots, so could I. But mine came with signatures. I stared at the printed copy of the photo collage he had sent. Noah's head tilted toward a rain-streaked window. It was almost beautiful, if it weren't dishonest. Still, I didn't tear it, didn't crumple it. Instead, I pinned it next to the check-in log and the GPS screenshots. One frame, 3 truths. Let them sit together. Let contrast speak for itself. This wasn't the kind of battle you fight by erasing the other side's story. It was one you win by showing what they left out. I slid the page into a sleeve and filed it under supplemental exhibits, emotional claims. I didn't hate the image. I just knew how it was built and what it ignored. I opened a new document and titled it Supplemental Exhibit A, Refuting Visual Claim. Inside I listed collage received from father, timestamped. GPS data from pickup log. Screenshot of school sign-out system. Testimony from school security. Incident overlap analysis. Each line had a source file, page number, and verification code. No adjectives, no commentary, just structure. I saved the file, exported it to PDF format, and added it to the shared case folder. Then I logged the submission date, flagged it for my attorney, and closed the document. The photos were no longer isolated. They had context. And context quietly wins. I was at the sink rinsing out Noah's lunchbox when the doorbell rang. A single chime. Brief. Then nothing. I dried my hands, walked to the front door, and looked through the peephole. No one there. Just an envelope on the mat. Another manila folder. I picked it up and turned it over. His handwriting this time. Quick, uneven. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I placed it under the desk lamp, letting the light fall flat across the surface. The kitchen behind me was warm with the smell of leftover pasta. The house was quiet. The court would hear more soon, but tonight it was just me, and what couldn't be edited. I gathered the signed witness statements like I'd collect receipts, small, official confirmations of what had already happened. No dramatic declarations, just quiet consistency. Miss Delaney, Noah's teacher, wrote, "Noah's mother has been the primary point of contact and pickup throughout the semester. Attendance steady, pickup punctual." Coach Morales' note was shorter. "Mother present at practice drop-offs and 2 Saturday games." I folded them neatly into the folder labeled Everyday Witnesses. No glowing testimonials, no judgment, just names, signatures, and dates. People who weren't on my side. They were just there. Enough to notice. That was all the court needed. I added the documents to the timeline and flagged them for inclusion at the next hearing. When people speak without being asked, it matters more. Their words don't sound like defense. They sound like memory. Noah had drawn a new picture. He slid it across the table while I was reviewing receipts. A stick figure stood at a stove, yellow light overhead, a smaller figure on a chair. "That's us," he said. He tapped the paper twice. "You're making soup, and I'm telling you about the moon." I paused. Took in the light he had drawn. The lamp over the stove. Not the office lamp. Not a courtroom. A kitchen light. He remembered moments I didn't realize were moments. I scanned the drawing and saved it under the name Kitchen Memory 02. Later, I would attach it to the binder with a page protector. Not as legal evidence, but as context. You don't teach a child how to remember. They just do. And they always choose light. That morning as we packed for school, Noah looked up and said, "Did you pack the red box? Dad forgot last time." I had. Lunch, extra shirt, snack. But the sentence stayed in my head as I zipped the bag. He said it plainly, not accusing, just aware. Like, he'd adjusted his expectations to the rhythm of who remembers what. At school drop-off, I opened the backpack and made sure the red container was visible. The teacher smiled and I smiled back. Routine. But his words echoed again later when I updated the parenting journal. I typed the sentence, quoting him exactly. Dad forgot last time. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because Noah remembered. And sometimes, a child's sentence says more than a filing ever could. That afternoon I reviewed the after-school schedule. Piano lessons on Tuesdays, soccer on Thursdays. Pickup needed to happen within a 15-minute window to avoid a late fee. I pulled up a map and marked the high-risk points, any location with tight transitions. Then I created a color-coded overlay. Orange for tight timing, red for back-to-back days. I named the file, Custody Logistics, Timing Conflicts. He hadn't asked for this, but I made it anyway. If he wanted the hours, he needed the infrastructure. The map showed where slip-ups were likely, not to accuse but to anticipate. There's a kind of care that lives in foresight, not in reaction. I emailed a copy to my lawyer with the subject, High-Risk Transition Zones. The file didn't explain. It simply mapped what was already true. That evening I sent him a message, a soft note with a spreadsheet link. Here's a list of times and locations where issues tend to come up. I thought it might help. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was all. I didn't follow up, didn't ask if he'd read it. I just logged the sent time, added it to the communication archive, and filed it under Collaborative Notices, Non-Response. It was never about the emoji. It was about the pattern. Every time I provided structure, he offered acknowledgement without commitment. That pattern had a shape. Soon it would be visible to someone else, not just to me. I updated the ledger with a new column. Label: Child Reported Observations. First entry: Dad forgot lunchbox. Confirmed by child 39. It wasn't an accusation, it was a detail. Logged not for drama but for clarity. I added a green check next to lunch provided by school, then I closed the file. The data was quiet, like everything else in this case. But that didn't make it weak. It made it harder to dismiss. Noah's world was shaped by schedules, light, and who remembered to put juice in the bag. That's what I was recording, not just parenting. Pattern, and it was becoming harder to ignore. I stood at the printer as the final document slid out. Bank statements, spending records, the parenting calendar lined up against each missed pickup. One page showed it all. 0 income, high entertainment expenses, no confirmed employment. I circled the numbers. Then I drew a single arrow from 0 reported income to $1,200 a month in discretionary spending. The line wasn't just visual, it was a fracture. He claimed availability, but availability without stability is an illusion. I laid the pages flat across the kitchen table and snapped a photo. Then I added it to the timeline log. Exhibit: Financial capacity versus care schedule. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't speculate. I simply pointed, so the court could follow. I opened a new folder and titled it Correlations: Missed Interviews versus Claimed Parenting Time. It took 5 minutes to align. Every week he declared free, he had skipped a job interview. The records matched. Phone logs, missed recruiter emails, calendar gaps. One column held the days he had Noah, the other, days he declined professional opportunities. My lawyer underlined the chart in red. This is your pivot point, he said. He's not choosing the child, he's avoiding the world. I nodded. No counterclaim. No moral high ground, just correlation. In custody, patterns tell the story. All we had to do was let the pattern breathe. The judge requested revised schedules based on demonstrated caregiving capacity. The phrasing stayed in my head. Not potential. Not intent. Demonstrated. I took that word and used it as a filter. Removed the hopeful estimates from his side. Replace them with verified logs, pickup windows, school signatures, parent-teacher attendance, all dated, all confirmed. I printed the new version and included a color key. Green, confirmed caregiving hours. Gray, unverified. Red, missed obligations. The schedule didn't argue. It simply held up a mirror. Then I compiled the entire file and renamed it Time versus Testimony, Adjusted Parenting Plan. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs visibility. I adjusted the lamp and angled it over the open folder. The light shifted, and the stack of pages cast a new shadow, shorter, more focused. The original plan was buried under revised tables, fewer what-ifs, more timestamps. I looked at the custody log and rewrote a note in the margin. When the light moves, the frame shifts. It wasn't a metaphor. It was exactly what had happened. I wasn't retreating. I was repositioning. What had once been defense was now proposal. What had once been response was now strategy. I highlighted the new file and moved it to the docket submission queue. Deadline met. Frame adjusted. Light re-angled. That was enough. The revised plan gave him more hours, not less, but with conditions. Each expanded block came with a clause. Requires weekly verification of pickups and communication log. He'd offered 80%. Now the proposal gave it, under scrutiny. I typed the condition into the document and added footnotes. Weekly logs, notification requirements, midweek accountability call. No penalties, just record keeping. If he wanted to parent more, he could, but it would be witnessed. I saved the final version and printed it in duplicate. My lawyer reviewed it and nodded. "You're letting him prove it now." I didn't respond, just handed over the file. Proof wasn't personal, it was procedural. I uploaded the proposal to the court portal. The progress bar filled slowly. Then, submission confirmed. No fanfare, no confirmation call. Just a digital receipt and the quiet hum of the hard drive. I leaned back and closed the screen. The living room was dim now, only the desk lamp glowing across the hardwood floor. I stood and slipped the printed copy into the labeled case binder. Noah was asleep down the hall. I didn't know what the judge would decide, but I knew what I had submitted. Not an accusation, a schedule. Not a rebuttal, a plan. It was time for the system to respond. We were back at the mediation table. No court this time. Just two attorneys, a neutral facilitator, and the hollow quiet of paperwork being passed hand to hand. I looked across at him. His face was tired but still certain. When asked about proposed changes, I spoke first. I'd like to test his caregiving proposal. 8 weeks. He leads. There was a pause. His attorney raised a brow. Mine nodded without looking at me. The facilitator jotted the idea on a yellow pad. I turned the document around and slid it forward. Each cell marked with tasks, times, deadlines, all based on his own 80% claim. If he believes he's ready, I added, he can sign the calendar. No challenge, just a condition. Trust, not declared, structured. We added conditions for Noah's safety. No missed meals, no late pickups. If either occurred more than once per week, the schedule would auto-correct the following week. Time swapped, not out of punishment, just balance. I typed the clause into the document, printed a fresh draft and highlighted it in gray. Beside it, a column for weekly entries. Pickup verified, meal documented. Nothing complex, just rhythm. My attorney reviewed the clause and added, if terms are breached, parent retains right to resume full schedule immediately. He didn't blink. He signed. I initialed beside the line. Parenting wasn't about winning. It was about reliability. And reliability had just been written into the contract. When he reached the signature box, he hesitated. Only a second, but it was there. The pen hovered. I watched the ink dry as he pressed it to the line, a blur, slightly uneven. He wasn't careless, he was uncertain. But he wanted this. Or he wanted to prove something. Either way, the pause mattered. I saw the outline of a father trying. Not succeeding, not yet, but trying. I marked the timestamp in my notes, 12:38 p.m. Father signed test plan. 1 part signature, 1 part hope. We wouldn't know which yet, but now we had something testable. I adjusted my work schedule behind the scenes, left flex time open in the early evenings. If things fell apart, I could step in. No fanfare, no warnings, just backup. I printed the altered shift schedule and kept it in my personal binder. It wasn't to be used unless needed, but needed came quickly in these scenarios. Noah wouldn't wait on anyone's ego. I checked the list of emergency contacts again. Ms. Ruth stayed available. The coach had been informed. I zipped the binder shut. Being flexible didn't mean being invisible. It meant being the net, even when you hoped the trapeze held. The facilitator reviewed the documents one last time. No penalties, just correction. That's what she said, not judgment, just feedback. Not leverage, just structure. He nodded. There was no bitterness on his face, just something unreadable. Tired hope, maybe. I packed my folder, he packed his. Outside the parking lot shimmered with afternoon heat. We didn't speak, not out of tension, just finality. This part had been built, now it had to stand on its own. We had handed each other what we said we wanted, and the system had accepted it. What came next wouldn't be words, it would be weeks. That evening, I uploaded the finalized plan to our shared parenting app, tagged Trial Period 8 Weeks, Father Primary. Then I scanned the signed version, renamed the file custody_provisional, phenos1_signed.pdf, and archived it. There was no noise in the house except the quiet hum of the fridge. Noah was already asleep. His sticker chart for the week had 3 stars filled in. I tucked the backup copy of the plan into the kitchen drawer beside the emergency flashlight. Close, but not visible. We weren't in the courtroom anymore. Now, we were in the experiment. Paper didn't hold the weight now. Time did. And time had just started ticking. I handed the signed schedule to my attorney just before court. He marked it with a tab and placed it in the stack for submission. A minute later, the judge entered. There was no grand opening. Just a nod and a short sentence. Let's review the latest updates. He spoke first. We've agreed to a trial. I'm fully available, 80% if needed. I watched the court reporter's fingers catch the words in real time. Each syllable counted. Each claim now permanent. My attorney passed forward the plan he signed, the same schedule he had once described but never tracked. The judge lifted it, skimmed, and nodded once. Exhibit accepted, she said. And just like that, his statement wasn't just spoken. It was on file. That's the difference between argument and evidence. One passes, the other stays. I added one more document to the file. An email from him dated 2 days before, requesting a completely open week, no meetings, no job leads. He sent it casually. Didn't realize the date aligned with today's hearing. The same week he declared full parenting capacity, he had cleared for nothing else. I printed the email, attached the timestamp, titled it, Schedule Clearance, Self-SZ. My lawyer inserted it into the supplemental packet, right behind the signed schedule. No commentary, just order. The judge looked through it and asked, Was this request related to your child's needs? He paused. Partially. I wrote down the word, underlined it twice. The court doesn't need answers. It only needs patterns. And now, the paper trail showed one. The judge closed the folder and rested her hand on the cover. "We'll test this plan," she said. "We expect weekly updates from both parties. Document all incidents, missed pickups, late arrivals, any inconsistencies. Keep it objective." She looked directly at me. "Will you comply?" "Yes." Then to him, he hesitated, then nodded. The court clerk entered a formal instruction into the docket. 8-week provisional custody schedule, monitored weekly for feasibility. There was no applause, no sigh. Just the sound of a gavel lightly hitting wood, once. A note more than a verdict. The test had begun, and every hour would now be measured. After the hearing, I walked down the hallway in silence. He followed a few steps behind. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The court would hear the next part, not us. The truth would show up in incident reports, attendance logs, and consistency, not emotion. I stepped outside. The sun was colder than expected. A mild wind pressed the hem of my coat against my leg. In my hand was the file, highlighted, time-stamped, signed. I crossed the parking lot and opened my car, then paused. Inside the glove box, I slid the copy into my backup binder. Some people carry outrage. I carried copies. That night, I printed 5 identical incident forms. Color-coded boxes, one for each weekday. I placed them in a clear folder beside the fridge. If something happened, a missed pickup, a forgotten item, a lapse in communication, it would be written, not discussed. I marked the folder, Custody Log, Week 1. Noah watched from the table, eating toast. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't need to. He just asked, "Are you working late again?" I shook my head. "Not this week." He smiled, a quiet one, not relief, just routine. I went back to the forms. They weren't about protection. They were about precision. At 9 p.m., I opened the document I had prepared in advance. The header read, "Test Implementation, Parental Care Plan, Provisional Period." I typed in the date, then a line beneath it, "First day complete, no incidents." I closed the file, saved the entry, and logged it in the weekly folder. Outside the window, the street was still. No cars, no voices. The house held its shape around me. I turned off the light in the kitchen, leaving only the hallway lamp. The plan was no longer a concept. It was in motion, and starting now, it would speak for itself, one entry at a time. I called the pediatrician's office first, asked to confirm that Noah's file listed both parents with equal access, and that emergency contact details had been updated. The nurse on the line paused. "Your information is up to date. His father hasn't made any changes." I thanked her, hung up, and added her initials beside the entry in my caregiver log. Then I printed 2 labels with the clinic's number and after-hours line. Stuck one to the inside of Noah's medicine kit, the other to the fridge. In an emergency, I didn't want confusion. Not for anyone. It wasn't a trust issue. It was a readiness issue. I titled the new page in the custody binder, "Health Contact Visibility, Dual Parent Use." Then I sat back and took a breath. Infrastructure isn't dramatic, but it's the only thing that holds when routine breaks. I packed Noah's school bag that evening with what I called the morning kit. His folder, his homework, his reading book, his lunch in the red container he liked. Then I added extras. An extra set of clothes, rain jacket, the form for Wednesday's field trip, and a card. Today's notes, Tuesday, drop off by 8, snack in the front pocket, reading log due, Noah watched me slip the card into the front zip. He asked, "What's that for?" I said, "Just in case Daddy needs a reminder." He nodded. "Sometimes he forgets the snack." He said it gently, not as a complaint, just a fact. I zipped the bag shut. The card wasn't there to blame. It was there to help. And to track. The next morning, I handed the checklist to him directly. We stood by the car. Noah was already buckled in. "This is everything. You don't need to guess." He took it, nodded quickly. Didn't really look at it. I'd formatted it so it could be followed without much effort. Color-coded for urgency. Lines for each task. Lunch, pickup time, after-school location. At the bottom, a reminder. Check-in confirmation due by 3 p.m. He folded it in half and stuffed it in the glove box. I didn't say anything. Didn't press. Just noted the time. 7:49 a.m. Later, I would check if the app notification arrived. Not to catch him, to record. The difference between intention and execution is usually measured in silence. That evening, I explained the calendar shift to Noah. We sat on the floor with the printed version beside us. His fingers traced the boxes. "Does this mean I stay with Dad more now?" "For a while, yes," I said. He didn't ask why. He asked how. "So on Tuesdays, who takes me to piano?" "Still Daddy. But I wrote it here so you can check." I circled the day in green. He smiled, then got a sticker and placed it on that square. Routine mattered more to him than custody did. I watched him fill in Wednesday, too. He liked knowing what came next. So did I. That's why I laminated the calendar and posted it on the bedroom wall. He needed direction, not drama. That night, I synced the updated calendar with the shared parenting app. Set reminders for myself to confirm tasks had been marked complete. Then I enabled notifications for both accounts. No assumptions, only alerts. I set one for 7:30 a.m. to check drop-off, another for 3:10 to confirm pickup. Both passive. I wouldn't message unless the log was empty. The app was our third party now. It didn't argue, didn't forget, just notified. I also added a shared note. "Please confirm piano arrival Thursday. Coach will log attendance." No reply. That was fine. The app would record whether he did or didn't. And in court, behavior doesn't need commentary. It just needs to be visible. I wrote one final phrase at the top of my journal that night. Routine first. Emotion follows. Not to harden myself, but to clarify what mattered. Every file I'd created, every checklist, every sticker, every app alert, was there for one reason: to replace chaos with rhythm. Not as a weapon, as a foundation. I checked the backpack again. Everything packed, cards still in place. Then I turned off the hallway light, walked into my room, and zipped the custody binder shut. Noah's sleep was steady. The trial had started, but the house didn't feel tense. It felt held. That would be the quiet difference now. Who could build structure, and who could keep it from breaking? The mediation room was smaller this time. Fluorescent light, a pitcher of water in the center, pens that didn't quite write cleanly. The facilitator handed out the parenting checklist like it was standard paperwork, because it was. A printed sheet with initials beside each task. Drop-off, medication, meals, follow-up communication. He sat across from me, not defensive, just tired. She walked us through the list, line by line. "Chemke tifai lam," she said once, softly. He nodded. I had nothing to add. Everything that needed to be said was either already signed or already missing. We moved through it like pilots in a cockpit. Checklist, toggle, mark. The room was silent except for the sound of pages turning. No argument, just structure being tested. The facilitator circled the item marked on-time pickup. 2 misses in the past week, documented. Both without notification. She clicked her pen and underlined it. This is a flag item. It has to be corrected. I didn't look at him, didn't need to. I felt his presence shift. Chin lower, breath quieter. He didn't contest it. She added a note at the bottom of the page. Correction required. Pickup window adherence. The paper absorbed it like dry ground. I folded my hands on the table. No emotion, no escalation. He had promised. Now the margin was narrowing. Not with punishment, with patterns. And patterns don't lie. They just continue. He requested an adjustment. A swap of the Wednesday pickup hour to accommodate a possible interview. His voice didn't carry weight. He said, possible, like someone already preparing to skip it. The facilitator looked at me. I shrugged lightly. If he notifies 24 hours ahead, I'm fine with the swap. She scribbled quickly. Adjustment allowed with 24-hour notice. Otherwise, schedule holds. He agreed. It was fair, not generous, just precise. It gave him space, but only if he respected time. And if he didn't, the window wouldn't stay open. The deal was now conditional. The signature, reactive. The margin for forgetting was shrinking. My attorney wasn't in the room, just me, the facilitator, and a clock on the wall that ticked a little louder after each sentence. I suggested a midweek log submission, twice per week instead of one. One on Wednesday, one on Saturday. It would track the small things before they piled up. She agreed. He didn't object. I slid over the sample log template I'd built. Color-coded fields, auto timestamps, room for incident notes. He flipped through it but didn't read. Just fill it in, I said. It tells its own story. He nodded. For a moment I almost believed he'd follow through, but systems don't rely on belief, they rely on checkboxes. This was now a system, not a negotiation. The facilitator stood and reviewed all changes. Midweek log entries, swap allowed with notice, flagged tasks corrected within next 7 days. We both initialed beside each line. It felt like a transaction, but also like a turning point. He leaned back, hands in his lap, his voice quieter than before. I just want to get it right. The first honest thing he'd said that day, maybe the first in a while. I didn't respond. Not out of pride, just fatigue. I had built a house out of forms, timestamps, and scheduled silence. Now he'd been handed the keys. Whether he opened the door was no longer my burden. Only the log would speak. Outside, the air was cool with the shift toward evening. I walked slowly to the car, carrying the revised checklist in a slim folder. Noah's sticker chart was in the passenger seat, folded but uncreased. At the top, he had written his own rule in pencil. Try again, even if tired. I smiled when I saw it, because it wasn't meant for me, but it worked anyway. I placed it in the binder next to the incident sheets and color-coded parenting plan. Routine had become a form of resilience, and that, more than the outcome, was what I could give Noah. Not perfection, just persistence. And a clear map of where things went wrong so they didn't have to again. It started with a single charge, $738.12 at a retail store, posted to a shared credit card that hadn't been used in months. The account was dormant, intentionally. I checked the timestamp, 3 days ago. The same week he claimed he needed to reduce hours with Noah due to financial strain. I printed the statement, circled the charge, and filed it under a new tab. Unaligned claims, financial contradictions. It wasn't the purchase, it was the timing. The day after, he missed Noah's piano practice without warning. The day after, he told the facilitator, I'm stretched too thin. The paper didn't argue. It just lined up against his words and waited. I didn't call him, didn't ask. I just saved the file. The ledger already had space for it. At the next log review, he admitted it out loud. I thought I'd have more time to get stable again. The mediator didn't react. She simply noted it. I did too. In my notes, verbal confirmation, unable to meet current schedule. It was said without malice, almost gently, the way people admit weather, not mistakes. He folded his hands, eyes on the table. It's harder than I thought, he added, and I believed him, not because I wanted to, but because the evidence had been building to this moment. When people fail, it's rarely loud. It's a string of missing receipts, late pickups, half-filled lunchboxes. The kind of failure you document, not punish. Because what comes next needs clarity, not emotion. We sat down in the hallway after the review, just the two of us, no mediator, no attorneys. I slid a copy of the current week's log across the bench. 3 late arrivals, 1 forgotten lunch. No communication on any of them. I didn't speak. He read. Eventually he looked up. Do you want me to step back? I shook my head. I want you to follow through, that's all. He nodded, not defensively, just slowly. He understood now that parenting wasn't about intention. It was about rhythm. Miss enough beats and the silence becomes its own statement. I picked up the copy and returned it to the folder. The hallway was quiet, but the lesson had volume. Back home, I opened the binder and added a new divider, midpoint, performance review. I wasn't keeping score, I was keeping record. That's different. I updated the tracker. Pickup compliance, 61%. Communication responses, 2 out of 5. Incidents, 4, verified. Then I moved to the next section. Proactive adjustments, 0. I paused, let the number settle in. Printed the log, date-stamped it, and placed it between the other weeks. I didn't annotate, didn't underline. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just let the page speak. And right now, every missed checkbox was speaking in sequence. I closed the binder slowly. Clarity doesn't need urgency. It just needs structure. I passed him in the parking lot the next day. He was unlocking his car, phone tucked under his chin, Noah already in the back seat. He looked up, startled. I got the Thursday reminder. Thanks. I hadn't sent one. The app had. But I nodded anyway. He shifted the bag on the passenger seat and added, I'll get better at this. It wasn't a promise. More like a self-directed note. I said, The plan helps. He nodded again, then looked at the dashboard like it might hold instructions. Maybe it did. Maybe everything we'd built, the checklists, the alerts, the tracking logs, wasn't just for court. Maybe it was scaffolding. And maybe he was finally noticing the weight of the structure, even if he hadn't built it. Later that evening, I signed the midterm summary and scanned it into the shared file. Labeled it, Week 4 Review, Conditional Continuation. The terms hadn't changed, only the tone had. Less resistance, more pause. I updated the header with one new phrase. Trial continues under observation. Metrics apply. No judgment, no revision. Just alignment. Routine has no ego. It just waits for results. I turned off the screen and looked at the calendar on the wall. The next week's column was already marked in pencil. Not filled in yet, just outlined. Because some plans are still being proven, and some parents are still deciding who they'll become. The first missed pickup was 12 minutes late, documented by the front desk with the time logged in red. Noah sat with Ms. Ruth until I arrived. She gave me a soft look, no judgment, just fatigue. He said he was stuck in traffic, she added, though he hadn't called ahead. I didn't respond. I signed the late release and walked Noah to the car. He wasn't upset, just quiet. When we buckled in, he said, I thought maybe he forgot. I didn't correct him. I opened the incident log that night and wrote it down. Date, time, no advance notice. Caregiver fallback activated. I didn't annotate the emotion. It wasn't part of the log. Only the timeline mattered. 12 minutes the first time. That was the starting point. The next day, Noah asked, "Am I supposed to ask Dad to pack lunch?" It was an honest question. His lunchbox the night before had come home full, unopened. I opened the lid and smelled room temperature pasta. His favorite, now cold and soggy. I noted the timestamp on the form. Lunch packed, unknown. Consumed, no. Reported by child. I didn't say anything. The absence wasn't visible until you looked inside the bag. That's how most of this worked. From the outside, the schedule held. But inside, closer, there were gaps. The quiet kind. The kind that didn't make noise until they repeated. I printed a fresh incident form and slid it under the binder clip. Line 2, week 1. The pattern was already forming. On Friday, he texted at 2:41 p.m. Running a bit behind. Can you grab him? Pickup was at 3:15. That wasn't a warning, it was a bailout. I had kept my afternoon flexible, knowing this might happen. Still, I paused. Waited 10 minutes. No follow-up. Then I left work early and headed to the school. The receptionist handed me the sign-out sheet. She didn't ask questions anymore. The ink from my signature was still wet when I got back in the car. I added another line to the log. Third pickup missed. Less than 24 hours notice. Fallback used. I didn't text him back, didn't send a reminder. The app logged it all, and that was enough. That evening, Noah colored stars on the calendar like usual. 3 green, 2 empty. He held the marker in the air and asked, "What color if Dad forgets?" I took the marker and uncapped a gray one. "No color. We just leave it blank." He nodded, careful, like he didn't want to say the wrong thing. Then he placed a single sticker on Saturday Square, a small moon. He didn't explain it, but it landed in the space where nothing had been marked. I logged it, not because it would be presented, but because it meant something. Children track absence differently, and when they decorate silence, you have to pay attention. He texted again that night. "Sorry, this week just got away from me." I read it under the hallway light, didn't reply. Just opened the binder and added it as a note. Apology received. Time, 8:57 p.m. No correction offered. No attempt to adjust the following week. I wrote, "No proposal for makeup. Apology noted but unresolved." This wasn't about blame. It was about follow-through. About whether the gaps were flukes or forecasts. So far, the signs weren't leaning in his favor. I set the binder down, washed Noah's lunchbox, and repacked it myself, just in case. By Sunday night, the log had 3 red marks, 2 late pickups, 1 forgotten meal, and a soft apology that didn't fix the ledger. I scanned the week's record and uploaded it to the shared drive. Named the file Trial Week 1 Log.pdf. Then archived it in my local copy. The house was quiet again. Noah was asleep. The calendar still held space for 7 more weeks, but 1 row was already full, and not in the way he had planned. I closed the laptop, marked the hard copy with a paperclip. Accountability wasn't confrontation, it was repetition, and repetition had already begun. I opened the form on Monday evening, filled it out line by line. Week 2. 3 incidents already, 2 late pickups, 1 lunch forgotten. I typed in the timestamps and attached the security sign-out image. Under caregiver report, I added, "Delay confirmed by school staff. Child was not distressed." That mattered, how Noah handled it. Still, patterns don't wait for distress to matter. They just stack. I printed the form, clipped it to the binder behind last week's page, and labeled it Week 2, Cumulative Entry Log. The pen didn't shake. It wasn't personal. It was procedural. That's what this had become, a quiet rhythm of consequence. And it had to keep moving. I didn't write opinions, only numbers. Pickup time listed as 3:10. Actual arrival, 3:25. Late by 15 minutes. No prior contact. Second incident this week. I logged the child's response as neutral. Noah had waited with the aide. He ate his snack early. He didn't complain when I arrived. Just said, "Oh, I thought you'd come today." That line sat in my head longer than it should have. I typed it into the notes section, verbatim. Not for the judge, for the pattern. Because at some point patterns become decisions, and the court would need clarity, not feelings. The page was now half full, and it was only Tuesday. He called that night, not to explain, to say he was trying. "I'm getting better at planning around the schedule," he said. I let the silence carry that sentence as far as it would. Then I answered, "Just fill the log." He exhaled, soft and uneven. "I know I've dropped some pieces." I didn't affirm or deny. There was nothing left to clarify. It was all recorded, every piece, every miss. I wrote in the communication ledger, spoke at 9:12 p.m., acknowledgement of inconsistency, no proposed change. Sometimes presence looks like effort. Sometimes it looks like learning. And sometimes it just looks like talking after the day is over. But parenting doesn't live in conversation. It lives in mornings. Wednesday, Noah placed stickers on the calendar without being prompted. 4 boxes, 1 star, 2 blank, 1 orange. "What's orange?" I asked. He shrugged. "Kind of in the middle." I didn't push, just noted it in my journal. Child-created grading system initiated. Ambiguous color code added. Even without meaning, it told a story. He was adapting, creating a scale of his own. The absence of blame wasn't forgiveness, it was navigation. That's how children survive uncertainty. They reframe it, quietly, without asking for language. I closed the notebook and checked the app log. Pickup marked. Time, 3:14 p.m., 1 minute early. I highlighted the cell green. There was still room for correction, but less room for error. I allowed myself one night off, just a single evening. No laptop, no logs, no review. I made dinner, lit the hallway light, folded the towels in the living room. Noah played on the floor with his space puzzle, humming a made-up tune. The quiet wasn't empty. It was intact. Later, after he was asleep, I sat in bed and marked the binder entry. No review conducted. Personal pause. The note didn't count against anything. It was just honest. Even steel needs to cool before it bends. I closed the binder again and left it on the table. Tomorrow would come. The work would resume. But for that one night, the structure held itself. On Friday, I submitted the midweek log. 3 incidents, 1 correction. No false claims, no fabricated excuses, only facts. The file uploaded smoothly. Trial Week 2 log.pdf, status active. The court wouldn't act on it yet, but the numbers were in motion and so was the threshold. At a certain point, even neutral logs begin to tilt the weight of a case. I updated the running summary. Late pickup trend, persisting. Parental learning, in progress, not confirmed. The phrases weren't emotional, they were surgical. That's what this part of the process required. The kind of clarity only repetition could reveal. And repetition by now was its own kind of truth. The email draft sat open on her screen for 2 hours. Subject: request for mediation adjustment. It wasn't accusatory, just factual. A listing of missed pickups, unreturned calls, a discrepancy in the medical copay. She wrote it like a filing, not a cry. Each paragraph began with a timestamp. Each bullet ended with a reference document. It was airtight. But still she didn't send it, not yet. Instead, she read it twice, then once more aloud. In the quiet, the words sounded less like evidence and more like exhaustion. What would it change? The calendar would still roll forward. Mediation would still arrive in 3 weeks. And truth, if real, needed no preface. She saved the draft, closed the laptop, and went to refill the rice jar. At school, Noah handed her a folded piece of paper, crayon drawing, 3 stick figures. 2 were holding hands, the third stood on the side holding a balloon. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing to the balloon. "That's me," he said. She paused. "And these 2?" He didn't answer, just shrugged. "Guessing game," he said. She smiled like she understood. But later, when she scanned the page into her binder, she labeled it Child Art, Ambiguous Representation of Family Roles. It felt sterile, but clarity sometimes wore the face of distance. She wasn't reading into it, just documenting it. The art was filed, not interpreted, not shared, not weaponized. Just kept, for balance. Thursday afternoon, the light over the garage flickered again. The same one that blinked when the custody call first came. She tightened the bulb, though it didn't need fixing. Some things just needed the illusion of control. That evening she picked up Noah early, a surprise. He clapped when he saw her. The teacher smiled. "You caught him in a good mood today." They walked to the car slowly. No rush, no distractions. She didn't check her phone once. Later she wrote in her notes, "Spontaneous early pickup, positive emotional response noted." Then put the journal away before it got too poetic. Facts were easier than feelings. Even joy had to be reduced to recordable terms now. Her attorney left a voicemail. "There's talk he might request unsupervised overnight again. Be ready." She didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, she stood at the kitchen counter and opened a blank document. Title: Potential Risk Considerations, Overnight Visitation. She listed everything. Medication errors, allergy misunderstandings, inconsistent discipline. It wasn't vengeance. It was safety. Boundaries were not punishments. They were fences. And fences, when built well, don't injure. They protect. She added a line at the bottom. "This is not a refusal, it's a response." Then closed the document. Didn't send that either, but kept it. Everything now was kept. She remembered a time before binders, before email chains and notarized forms. A time when Sunday mornings were just cartoons and cereal, when both their names were on the pediatrician file without tension. That memory didn't make her sentimental. It made her precise. Because that time was gone. And pretending otherwise was a luxury she couldn't afford. Noah asked if he could bring his stuffed lion to Dad's next week. She nodded, but packed the medication with it, just in case. She added a tag. Allergy reminder. Do not remove EpiPen from bag. Printed in bold, clear, visible. She wasn't leaving space for confusion anymore. Intentions could be misread, but labels couldn't. That night she returned to the email draft, read it one last time. No typos, no heat. Still unsent. She hovered over Send, then chose Archive. Sometimes clarity meant waiting, not out of fear, out of confidence. The case was shaping itself now, not through anger, through absence of error. She opened a new file. Week 3, Prep. No new escalations. She liked that title. It meant he hadn't made a new mistake, and she hadn't been forced to react. That was a kind of peace too. Not trust, but stillness. She turned off the hallway light and let the dark rest. The envelope came on a Wednesday, thicker than usual. Legal cream color. She knew what it was before opening it. Inside, the hearing date. Black ink on white paper. No emotion, no apology. Just, you are scheduled to appear 9 a.m., Courtroom 4C. She sat down, reread it 3 times. The hallway light clicked off by itself, motion sensor. But it felt like something else. Like the silence of a page that knows it will be read out loud. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just placed the letter flat on the table, aligned the corners perfectly, then opened a fresh document. Title: Hearing Prep, Week 4. There was no plan to win, only a plan to not be misread. She called her attorney. He's requesting expanded visitation every other week, Friday to Sunday. No panic, no surprise. She asked one question. Did he list who would supervise overnights? Silence. Then, he said he wouldn't need one anymore. She exhaled, slow. This isn't about punishment. It's about patterns. I know, the attorney said, but they won't see it unless it's written. So she wrote, documented every canceled pickup, every inconsistency, not as attack, as rhythm, because patterns didn't lie, only people did. At bedtime, Noah asked, do I have to pack my red blanket again? She paused. Do you want to? He shrugged. Daddy said he doesn't like it. She kept her face still. I like that it keeps you warm. He nodded, folded it in the suitcase anyway. Later, she wrote in her journal, self-censorship by child. Note emotional implications. She hated writing it like that, like a lab report. But feelings didn't translate well in court. Only facts did. And facts, she'd learned, required clean language. No edge, no plea. The night before the prep meeting, she cleaned the kitchen. Not because it was dirty, but because her hands needed something to do. Scrubbing the stove became a form of thinking. Like each burnt stain was a question she could erase. By 1 a.m. the floor glistened, the counter sparkled, and still no peace. She sat at the table rereading her file. Page 9, email, April 7th. Declined alternate pickup without reason. Page 14, voicemail, May 12th. Missed medication reported by teacher. None of it screamed. It just stacked, quietly, brick by brick. Morning came with fog, literal and internal. She walked into her lawyer's office with 2 folders, one labeled custody prep, the other just Noah, photos, drawings, his latest poem, The Rain Talks to Me. The lawyer smiled gently. These help, but we both know what moves them is procedure. She nodded. Still, she left the second folder on the desk. Let it exist. Not as evidence, but reminder. That this wasn't war. It was parenting. Even if the court forgot that sometimes. That night, she didn't write anything. She didn't review the binder. Didn't annotate, highlight, or flag. She just lay beside her son. Watched his breath rise and fall. Watched the fan circle. Watched the quiet. And let herself stop. Because strategy was nothing without presence. And she didn't want to win a case by losing herself. Tomorrow could carry its own weight. Tonight, she just wanted to feel him breathe. No annotations, no margins, just rhythm, just air. The courtroom was colder than she expected. Fluorescent light made everything look faded. She wore navy, hair pulled back, no jewelry except the ring Noah made from yarn. The judge entered. People stood. She didn't look at him, not yet. Her ex sat with his lawyer, legs wide, jacket too new. She focused on the folder, the one with tabs she rehearsed until the corners curled. The bailiff called names, then hers. She stood, voice steady, not because she wasn't scared, but because the truth didn't tremble unless you let it. They started with calendars, then emails. Her lawyer slid photos across the table. The red blanket, the birthday party he missed,
the school note about unexplained absence. She answered each question calmly. Did you deny visitation? No. I rescheduled due to illness. Documented here. Do you discourage contact? I encourage it. I just protect consistency. The judge nodded. No expression, no clue. But she watched his pen move, and that meant something. The record was being written. Finally. Then it was his turn. His lawyer smiled too wide. Words like involved father, evolving co-parenting, unintended misunderstandings. He glanced at her once, like an actor checking his cue. She didn't look back. He said he wanted more weekends, said he bought a bunk bed, said Noah loved being with him. She listened, not to refute, but to measure what mattered. And beneath the polish, she heard it. No mention of the poem, the drawings, the medicine log. Only plans, not patterns. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled.
Then the question, do you believe joint custody is in the child's best interest? Her chest rose once, then settled. I believe stability is. And do you consider the father capable of providing that? She didn't answer right away. She looked down, at the yarn ring, then up. In moments, yes, but not in patterns. Silence stretched. The judge nodded once. No reaction. Just the sound of typing. Just the next case number called. Outside, she sat on the courthouse steps, shoes stiff, throat dry. Her lawyer said, "We did what we came to do." But the word didn't feel right. It wasn't done. Not until Noah knew he was safe. Not until the pattern stopped repeating. She watched other families pass. A mother scolding, a father lifting a toddler. And for a moment, she felt nothing but fatigue. Deep, bone deep. Still, she stayed there, long after everyone left. Just her and the echo of her own steadiness. At home, Noah was building a fort. Pillow walls, blanket roof. He said, "You want to come in?" She crawled in beside him. It smelled like fabric softener and crayons. He handed her a flashlight. "Rules are you can't talk about grown-up stuff in here." She smiled. "Okay, what do we talk about?" He whispered. "Just quiet." They lay there in the soft dark. Nothing urgent, nothing legal. Just breath and closeness. And for the first time in weeks, she let herself feel that maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The letter came folded in thirds. No envelope. Just dropped off by courier, unsigned. Her name printed in neat legal typeface. Noah was still asleep upstairs. She read it alone at the kitchen table, hands still sticky from wiping syrup. The first line. In the interest of resolving this matter amicably. Her throat tightened. She read it again. He wanted a settlement. Every other weekend, no overnights, no court review. In exchange, he'd waive child support, no back payments, just silence. Just a clean line drawn down the middle. Her hand stayed on the table, still. Then curled slowly into a fist. She didn't call her lawyer, not yet. She needed space to hear herself. She walked into the backyard. No shoes. Damp grass underfoot. The garden was overgrown, tomatoes drooping, lavender brittle. She knelt, pulled at weeds like they meant something. Like if she cleared enough, the truth would show. Would she take the offer? Would she be free or complicit? The terms gave her peace, but not justice. And wasn't that what she promised herself the night she left? Not just to survive, but to stand, even when tired. Later, she watched Noah play with building blocks. He made a tower, then knocked it over, then built it again. She asked softly, "Do you miss him?" He looked up. "Sometimes, when it's quiet." She nodded. Do you want to see him more? He thought for a moment. Only when he's not tired, or yelling. She nodded again. No judgment, just data, from the only voice that mattered. She kissed his forehead. Thanks for telling me. He smiled, went back to his tower, and she knew. The offer wasn't about him. It was about keeping control of the silence. She wrote back by hand, no lawyer, just ink. She rewrote it twice before getting it right. I am not interested in silence. I'm interested in continuity, in rhythm, in days that feel like days, not dice. She didn't send it yet. She folded it, placed it in the drawer next to old magnets and expired coupons. She'd decide tomorrow. Tonight she wanted to hold her son, not a pen. Let the law sleep for once. Let the house be just a house. No strategy, no edge, just breath between walls. The porch light flickered as she stepped outside. She tapped it lightly. It steadied. A small thing, but it felt like a sign. Her neighbor across the fence said, "Storm coming?" She looked at the sky, flat and dark. Maybe, or maybe not. She said, "Could just be the air shifting." He nodded. She stood there for a while. Barefoot, quiet, no phone, no court. The paper still in the drawer. Her decision not about winning anymore, but about what could grow if she stopped picking weeds and started planting. She went back in, locked the door, washed her hands, checked Noah's breathing, then sat by the window and opened her planner. She crossed out the court date, not because it wouldn't happen, but because it no longer scared her. He could send all the offers he wanted. She knew the truth now. Patterns don't shift with paper. They shift with presence. She'd meet him in court if she had to, but not from fear, not from threat, only from clarity. She clicked off the light and let the quiet fill the house. This time, she owned it. The courtroom was smaller than she imagined. No echoes, no drama. Just beige walls and a humming air vent. He sat across the aisle, adjusting his cufflinks like they mattered. She sat with a yellow notepad, untouched. No lawyer today. Just her. And truth. The clerk called her name. She stood. Not straight like armor, but steady like earth. Her voice didn't shake. She answered every question with care, not fire. Facts, not fury. She didn't look at him, not once. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about the life she was building from the ruins. He tried charm, then confusion, then indignation. The judge wasn't moved. Her documentation was precise. Her schedule was consistent. The photos showed laughter. The school record showed progress. Noah was thriving, because she didn't flinch, because she didn't fold. She could feel it in the room. The shifting weight, the recognition. This woman had not fled. She had chosen peace and earned it. When they asked for closing remarks, she simply said, "I want my son to feel safe. That's all I've ever wanted." Silence followed, not awkward, but reverent, like even the walls had heard. The ruling came after lunch. She sat with her hands in her lap, thumb circling her knuckle. Primary custody awarded. Supervised visitation. Reevaluation in 1 year. It wasn't a triumph. It was a start. He blinked, confused, as if control had been some permanent thing, not borrowed, not broken. He didn't argue, didn't make a scene. He just stood and walked out. She waited a beat longer, then picked up her notepad, still blank, but heavier now, like it had absorbed everything unspoken. She walked out into the sun. The warmth surprised her. It was real, and it was hers. Noah was waiting in the hallway, holding her sister's hand. He ran to her. "Is it over?" She nodded. He looked up. "Can we get tacos?" She laughed. "Yeah, baby. Tacos it is."
They walked to the parking lot. No celebration, no announcement. Just a mother and a boy, crossing a line no one else could see. She opened the car door. He climbed in. Buckle clicked. He looked out the window. "Can I sleep at home tonight?" She said, "That's where you live now." His smile was soft, like he finally believed it. She closed the door and exhaled. That night she washed the sheets, new detergent, lemon and cedar. She vacuumed corners she'd ignored, trimmed the rosemary by the window, lit the porch light. Not out of habit, but ceremony. A quiet ritual of return. She poured tea, sipped, listened. No footsteps above, no pacing. Just Noah's even breath through the monitor. She didn't cry, didn't collapse. She just stood there, bare feet on tile, letting the peace take shape around her. A different kind of victory. The one no one gives you. The one you build yourself, brick by gentle brick. The letter still sat in the drawer. She took it out, held it under the kitchen light, then fed it to the shredder. The offer was void now, not because she won, but because she no longer needed permission to live free. She turned off the lights, checked the locks, slid under the covers beside her son. His hand found hers in the dark. "Mom," he whispered. "Yeah." "We're okay now?" She pulled him closer. "We've always been okay." The night deepened. No ghosts, no echoes. Only breath, only warmth.
Only the sound of a life reclaiming itself, one heartbeat at a time. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a moment you stayed silent when you should have spoken, or spoke when no one listened, then leave a comment. I want to hear your voice. Maybe you've been through a custody battle. Maybe you've watched someone lie in court and get away with it. Or maybe you've simply wondered, what would I do if it were me? That's where these stories begin, in the quiet questions we carry alone. But we don't have to carry them alone anymore. Every story on this channel is built from truth, the kind that hides behind polite smiles and court transcripts, the kind that doesn't get told unless someone dares to speak first. So speak, comment, share. And if you haven't already, subscribe. There's more coming. Stories of women who held their ground, of fathers who chose silence, of families undone by greed and rebuilt by love. The world needs these stories. And maybe, just maybe, you need them too. So don't just scroll away. Subscribe now. Be part of the conversation. Because sometimes, the smallest comment is the beginning of someone else's courage.